Well, we're back, and it's time for us to kind of switch gears and go back up to Salem and check in with our good friend Dave Dotterrer. He's the Oregon House and Senate Republican Budget Coordinator. And I so appreciate Dave's passion and commitment to find out what's really going on. And so we're Skyping him in this morning. Hi, Dave. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you.
Yeah, good to see you. Listen, a lot going on up there. How's the budget process from your perspective?
Well, it's working along here and everything. I think the issue right now, though, is PERS is on the table, and that's a significant piece of this budget. And so what we're seeing right now is people working through the different PERS ideas that have been put on the table.
Well, has any of the Republican PERS ideas gotten out of committee?
No. In fact, that's one of the issues that's here. Is there's been a lot of PERS bills and PERS concepts put on the table, are put into bill form, and not one of them has had a hearing yet. And so what we're really seeing is that yesterday there was a hearing on the Democrats' plan, which is essentially the co-chair's plan,
right?
Which is, as many of us believe, is PERS light. That's the least. That is the smallest number, if you will, and that's getting a hearing.
How can you possibly budget knowing there's this arbitrary figure out there? You don't know what it is, and yet you got it inserted into the budget. I mean, is this going to be a last-minute panic thing?
Well, I don't know whether it will or not. But if you talk to each of the subcommittee, the people I work with on each of the subcommittees within the budget process, they have budget numbers. And they have targets that they know they need to hit. And they have, this is how many resources I have to work with, or we have to work with a particular programmatic area. Well, the problem is that if you don't know what your number one expense is, for example, you're trying to do the Department of Corrections. You're trying to figure out how much money are we going to spend on prisons. I mean, that's obviously a very important function. And it's also a very, very expensive function. Well, their biggest expense happens to be personnel, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so how do you know what their personnel costs are going to be? So how do you work around that? So we really do need to resolve this. And what you're seeing right now is this has possibly come into a culmination point here, where you've got these three different competing ideas on the table.
All right, just back to PERS just for a second, or stay with it. Explain to us what it is, because I know it's been modified, but at the end of the day, this thing costs a lot of money, no matter what level you come out at. Well,
yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, the patient, in this case, the governments of Oregon, and let's be very, very clear here that we're not just talking about the state government here. Actually, state government is the smallest part of the PERS program. Local governments and water districts and things like that, they make up 40% of this process. This is a huge number for the county and for your cities, and the same thing for your school districts. They make up a third of this program. So, but what you're really talking about is over a couple of budget cycles here, we're looking at about a $2 billion increase in the cost of the program. And so when you look at what each of the programs saves, you have to put it up against that. Okay, so let's see. In the current budget cycle and the next budget cycle, it's going to cost all governments at all levels $2 billion, and this program saves X. Okay, compare the numbers. And PERS Lite, the one that's on the table right now, saves about 20% of that, a little over $400 million. Okay, and it's kind of how you have to look at it. And people need to recognize that this is a huge expense that doesn't buy you any government services in that sense. I mean, you obviously have to pay your folks, but yeah. So that's the issue.
All right, so sooner or later it's going to require more revenue. Now, where's everybody looking for it?
Well, that's just it. What we're saying is, let's not look for revenue. In other words, as I said, the patient is hemorrhaging here, and we're spending a lot of money on this. And so there's a proposal on the table to merely increase taxes and to get to a balanced budget. And my position is, why would you give the patient a blood transfusion before you stop the bleeding? Stop the bleeding, and it's PERS that's bleeding our budgets. So the answer really is solve the PERS problem, right, and solve it for the long term. Go big.
All right. So any other items that are still kind of slippery out there? K through 12, is it going to get out early, or is it going to be held to the end?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of talk that K through 12 will come out early. Yeah, there's a pretty broad consensus that was the right thing to do last time. There's a broad consensus on what the number ought to be, but on the other hand, now you throw in the dynamics of discussions about PERS reform, yeah, and possible quote revenue enhancements, tax increases. Okay, that may hold us up.
All right, so where are you in the process? I mean, when do you think this thing will start to narrow down?
I think we're going to start to see it narrow down in the next few weeks. There's a lot of discussions going on, and I think as of right now, the cards have been put on the table by all the different groups, and that's what I say, that there's these three different plans out there. There's the PERS Light, which comes out of the co-chair's budget. There's the governor's, which is more of the middle of the road, and then there's the one that's been put forward by the School Boards Association and also by the Republicans here, and that's a much bigger number. In fact, the latest number that was put forward was a savings of almost $2 billion, not $400 million, but $2 billion in the next budget cycle.
Do you think your colleagues on the Democratic side see this, or do they just say, let's put the PERS in, let's put K through 12 in, then we'll figure out how to fund it later? I mean, I realize you're outvoted, the Republicans are outvoted on this. You got all these PERS ideas that are still being hidden in committee and can't get a hearing. At the end of the day, the Democrats are in control and they like to spend money they don't have. Are you worried?
Yes, very, very much so, because you see, what we're going to do here is if we just go with PERS Light, what we're essentially saying is this: we're not going to solve PERS for the long term. We're just going to get through the next couple of years, and then we'll be back here in another couple of years, and we'll have this same battle all over again, and it'll be based upon a different set of numbers, and we'll just it's like a serial running gun battle here. I mean, instead of look, there's some great ideas for fixing this well into the future. Do it once, go big, and then we'll move on to the other issues.
All right. Any other surprises you smell, maybe, that might pop up?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. Well, I think one of the other issues that I think people need to be paying attention to is there is an issue. There's some proposals on the table to change the sentencing guidelines surrounding Measure 11 and Measure 57. For those of the people who know, the mandatory minimums that were passed by the people of Oregon over a decade ago, and some would argue have been quite effective in reducing crime. Also, but it has driven up our population, and so there's some discussion surrounding that. So I think people that need to pay attention to that, because this is going to touch things like this changing sentencing guidelines for crimes like child molestation and some things like that. So I mean, these are things that they really need to be paying attention to.
All right. What about the Oregon Health Plan? I know that the governor's high on it. He likes the Obama plan. How's that going to impact the budget processing?
Well, I think in this particular budget cycle, not particularly a lot, but if anybody had a chance to see Dennis Richardson's newsletter last week, one of the things that we've been working on and looking into is we just discovered that when you start to get out in the 17-19 time frame of this program, we have this huge $1.5 billion hole in the budget in the program, and we actually have a chart that shows that you get out to that period, and it shows this budget gap of about $1.5 billion that says state funds TBD, to be determined. And you go, whoa. You know, I don't know about you, my friend, but that makes my antenna go up and go, whoa, wait a minute, let's start looking at this. So there's some issues out there with it that we really need to address. As
you go back and forth, House and Senate, Ds and Rs, how do you think the state's faring overall?
You know, I think there's a lot of good discussions going on here. Of course, you know, I'm obviously not invited into the Democratic caucuses, so. You know, but I do see a lot, for example, on the Republican side, working together on what the various members believe in, and reaching compromises, because there are differences between members, and there are going to be members who are not going to vote with their caucus, and that's fine. But on the other hand, I've also seen a lot of good discussion, particularly over here in the Senate side, between the Republicans and the Democrats, of, you know, people putting their cards on the table and say, look, this is important to me, what's important to you, so let's talk about this.
That's a reflection on President Courtney's ability to get people to talk.
Oh, it is. I mean, he was in here yesterday with the Senate Republicans, and everybody would put their cards on the table about PERS and everything, and the discussions will continue. But the point is, they're talking.
Yeah, that's
and right. I'm fairly confident that they're going to reach a consensus.
Good. Dave, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your service up there. Thanks for keeping us informed. I look forward to having you back many more times as this session progresses.
Okay. Good to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Blessings on you. Okay. We'll be right back.